There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It waits. It sits in your chest while you stare at your phone, reread the last message, replay the last look, and try to understand how someone who once felt so close can suddenly feel like a locked door. No explanation, no clean ending, just distance, just silence. Just that strange, humiliating ache of knowing they felt something and still pulled away. And what hurts the most is not even the silence itself, it's what the silence makes you do, how it turns you against yourself, how it makes you overthink every word, every pause, every moment you were too much, too emotional, too available, too honest. How it convinces you that if you had just said it better, loved them softer, needed less, reacted less, waited more, then maybe they would have stayed open. Maybe they wouldn't have disappeared into that cold, unreachable version of themselves. But here is the brutal truth most people never want to hear. The more you chase an avoidant when they pull away, the safer they feel being away from you. Not because you are unlovable, because your pursuit removes the cost of their withdrawal. Your panic becomes their cushion. Your over-explaining becomes their escape route. Your loyalty becomes the proof that they can disconnect, shut down, go quiet, and still have access to your energy whenever they want it. And once you see that, something inside you should go still, because this is where your power has been leaking. Not in loving them, in abandoning yourself while trying to keep the connection alive. That is why this matters so much. Because the avoidant dynamic is not built on a lack of feeling. It is built on overwhelm. It is built on a nervous system that interprets closeness as pressure, intimacy as exposure, need as danger. The moment the bond becomes emotionally real, the body can read it like a threat. The amygdala lights up, cortisol rises, the nervous system searches for relief. And for someone wired to equate distance with safety, relief often looks like detachment. So when they go cold, when they take longer to reply, when their voice changes, when they suddenly need space right after you got closer, it does not always mean they stopped caring. Sometimes it means they cared enough to get scared. Sometimes the very feelings you were hoping for were the ones they didn't know how to regulate. That is the part nobody tells you. Avoidants are often not running from you. They are running from what being with you activates inside them. Dependency, vulnerability, the loss of control. The old memory in the body that says closeness leads to engulfment, disappointment, shame, or pain. Their dopamine spikes in pursuit, in mystery, in space, in fantasy. But sustained intimacy? That can trigger internal alarms they do not have the language to explain. So they do what overwhelmed nervous systems do. They reduce stimulation. They numb. They delay. They disappear into work, distractions, logic, routine, exhaustion, anything that helps them feel less exposed to the intensity of being emotionally needed. And if you don't understand this, you personalize it. You think their distance is a verdict on your worth. It isn't. But the next part matters even more. Understanding their psychology does not mean sacrificing your dignity to accommodate it. This is where so many people get trapped. They become so compassionate toward the avoidance wounds that they become cruel to their own. They excuse what breaks them. They romanticize inconsistency. They call emotional deprivation patience. They call self-betrayal unconditional love. No. Love without self-respect turns into slow self-erasure. And this is why the most powerful thing you can do before you walk away is not to beg, not to explain, not to threaten, not to perform your pain in one last dramatic message. It is to become emotionally non-reactive. That is the core concept. Not silence as punishment, not detachment as a game. Emotional non-reactivity, the kind that says, I feel this deeply, but I will not bleed in front of someone who only knows how to come close when I am breaking. Because when you are reactive, the dynamic stays predictable. They withdraw, you pursue. They hesitate, you intensify. They shut down. You prove that no matter how little they give, you will keep the emotional current running for both of you. But when you become calm, clear, and self-contained, something shifts in the architecture of the bond. Now there is space. Now there is consequence. Now there is absence where your reassurance used to be. And absence is where the avoidant finally meets their own feelings. Not when you are flooding them with paragraphs. Not when you are trying to convince them. Not when you are translating their emotions better than they ever have. They feel it when the noise stops. They feel it when your nervous system no longer volunteers to regulate theirs. They feel it when your presence is no longer available on demand. This is why what you say before you walk away matters. Because it becomes the emotional imprint they are left alone with. And if said correctly, it does not trigger their defenses the way blame does. It does not give them something to fight, dismiss, or rationalize. It does something far more unsettling. It makes them feel the truth. The line is simple. You say, I'm not walking away because I don't care. I'm walking away because I care too much to keep betraying myself for a connection that only survives when I silence my needs. Feel that. Not accusation, not begging, not performance. Just truth with a spine. You are not trying to wound them. You are naming reality. And that reality is devastating to an avoidant in a way most people don't understand. Because beneath the detachment is often a deep fear of being the person who ruins love. The person who cannot sustain what they claim to want. The person who reaches for intimacy and then flinches when it arrives. When you leave with chaos, they can protect themselves by focusing on your reaction, your tone, your drama, your instability. But when you leave with composure, with sadness and certainty, there is nowhere for them to hide. Now they are left with themselves. Now they have to sit in the echo of what you said. Now your absence is no longer loud. It is haunting. They start remembering the moments they brushed off, the message they never answered, the tenderness in your face when you asked for clarity, the way you kept trying to make the relationship safe while they kept treating depth like a demand. And this is where obsession begins. Not always outwardly, not always dramatically, but psychologically. Because what the avoidant resists in the moment often grows in the distance. When the threat of intimacy is removed, their nervous system settles. Cortisol drops. The pressure is gone. And in that quiet, buried attachment can rise to the surface. The feelings they suppressed become easier to access when they no longer have to respond to them in real time. Memory softens their defenses. Dopamine fills in the gap. The mind starts replaying what was lost. That is when they check your page. That is when they wonder if you meant it. That is when your name moves through their mind in the middle of ordinary moments, while driving, while working, while lying awake later than they meant to. That is when they feel your absence as sensation. Not because you manipulated them, because you finally stopped interrupting the consequences of their avoidance. Imagine it. The last conversation is not a fight. You are calm. Your voice is steady, maybe even softer than they expected. They are waiting for you to crack, to plead, to ask one more time where this is going. They are prepared for emotion they know how to retreat from. But instead, you look at them with that unbearable kind of clarity and say, I love what I felt with you, but I won't keep shrinking to fit inside your comfort zone. Now their script fails. Because avoidants often survive through emotional predictability. If they know you will chase, they know where the power is. If they know you will stay available, they don't have to confront the loss. But if you become the one person who sees them clearly and still refuses to remain in the half-love, you break the pattern they unconsciously depended on. And people obsess over what breaks their pattern, especially when it exposes a truth they were trying not to face. They may not run after you immediately. That is important to understand. Sometimes the avoidant response to real emotional impact is more shut down at first, not less. More silence, more delay, more confusion. Their system may still need time to process what your departure means. So if you say the right thing, and then keep checking, keep posting for them, keep reaching for signs, you destroy the effect. This is the warning. Do not break the pattern only to crawl back into it. Do not deliver a final truth and then dilute it with anxious follow-up. Do not say, I'm done, and then secretly hope your availability will keep the door emotionally open. The power is not in the sentence alone. The power is in your ability to hold it. That is what makes it real. Because the moment you walk away without collapsing, you become unfamiliar to them. And unfamiliar becomes magnetic. You are no longer the person orbiting their fear. You are the person who stepped out of it. You are no longer feeding the connection with your pain. You are no longer asking to be chosen by someone who keeps choosing distance. You are no longer trying to convince a dysregulated nervous system to give you a version of love that only exists in their potential. Potential is not presence. Potential is not partnership. Potential is not peace. And deep down, you know that is what has been killing you. Not just losing them. Loving who they could be while starving beside who they are. There is grief in admitting that. Real grief, because part of you still wants the fantasy to become true. Still wants them to wake up, come back, explain everything, hold your face, and finally meet you in the place you have been waiting. But if that ever happens, it will not happen because you stayed and suffered long enough. It will happen because your absence forced reality to replace comfort. And even then, you must understand this. The goal is not to make them obsess. The obsession is a side effect. The real goal is to stop living like your worth depends on whether an emotionally unavailable person can access their feelings consistently. That is the true transformation. Because the version of you that keeps clinging is not weak, just wounded. Conditioned to mistake inconsistency for intensity. Conditioned to confuse longing with love, chemistry with safety, emotional hunger with devotion. But healing asks something harder than hope. It asks you to become a person who no longer negotiates for what should be freely given. A person who can feel abandoned without abandoning themselves. A person who can miss someone and still choose peace. A person who understands that being unforgettable has very little to do with beauty, perfection, or saying the perfect line. It has everything to do with emotional self-possession. Think about the people who linger in the mind. It is rarely the ones who begged hardest. It is the ones who stood in their truth without trying to control the outcome. The ones who could love deeply without collapsing into pursuit. The ones who left an imprint of dignity. The ones who made you feel the cost of losing them only after they were gone. That is what you become when you stop chasing closure from someone who can only offer confusion. You become the mirror, and mirrors are hard to forget. Because now, when they think of you, they do not just remember your warmth. They remember the moment you stopped accepting less than your soul could survive on. They remember that you saw through their distance without demonizing it. That you understood their fear without becoming available to its consequences. That you did not need to hate them to leave them. That kind of goodbye does something. It bypasses their defenses. It reaches the part of them that knows. The part that felt safe with you but could not tolerate the exposure of being truly known. The part that wanted closeness but panicked when closeness required consistency. The part that mistook freedom for avoidance and control for peace. And if they obsess, let them. That is their lesson. Yours is different. Yours is to become so rooted in your own value that you no longer need someone else's delayed realization to validate what you already are. So if you are standing at the edge of this ending, trembling, heartbroken, still hoping they will suddenly become clear, hear this carefully. You do not need one more explanation. You do not need one more sign. You do not need to decode their mixed signals until your intuition goes numb. You need one clean moment of truth. One sentence that honors your heart without handing over your power. Say it calmly. Say it once. I'm not walking away because I don't care. I'm walking away because I care too much to keep betraying myself for a connection that only survives when I silence my needs. Then go. Go without the performance. Go without the extra paragraph. Go without checking whether it landed. Let silence do what your suffering never could. Let the nervous system that kept fleeing finally feel what it lost. Let the absence speak. And while they sit with the echo, you begin the deeper work. You return to yourself, to the parts of you that became small in the name of love, to the self-respect that got traded for hope, to the body that learned to live in anticipation of crumbs. You teach it something new. I am safe, even when someone cannot stay. I am worthy, even when someone cannot choose me properly. I am powerful not because I can make someone love me, but because I will never again beg for what dishonors me. That is the shift. That is the moment the story changes. Not when they come back, when you do. When you come back to yourself so fully that whether they return becomes irrelevant. And that is the final twist nobody tells you. The moment you truly stop needing the avoidant to validate your worth is often the moment their attention turns toward you most intensely. Because your energy is no longer reaching for them, it is resting in itself. It is full. It is self-held. It is gone from the old arena where they knew how to keep control. Now they feel the distance. Now they feel the mystery. Now they feel you. But by then, if you have done this right, obsession is no longer the prize. You are. And you do not belong to anyone who can only love you when you are leaving.